Hi guys, today we are going to be making a farmhouse bread that is quick, it's easy, it doesn't have half of the ingredients that you see in store-bought bread, so it's better for you. And thank you to a special ingredient. This bread is light, fluffy, and has that lovely moist texture of sandwich bread. You're gonna love it, let's check it out. So this recipe will lend itself to making bread loaves or really nice soft dinner rolls. I'm going to be making both today, so I'm actually doing 3 times the recipe, but I'll put the recipe in the show notes so you can multiply it up or down as you wish. Just to run through the ingredients that I am going to be using, I have flour here. It is just an all-purpose flour. We have got some sugar, which I'm only going to be using to start the yeast. So I've got some warm water here and dry active yeast. It's not instant yeast. I prefer to use dry active yeast. And then the other 2 ingredients are milk. I am using store-bought A2 milk. It's a different quality of milk because it has different protein to your regular store-bought milk. Goats and sheep's milk is also naturally A2, but if you want A2 milk from a cow, you have to do a little bit of research to find it. And then the very special ingredient that I am incorporating into this recipe is lard. Now this is our pasture-raised lard. Our pigs are a lard breed of pigs called the Mangalitsa. You can find out more about them on our channel. But please don't substitute lard with anything like Crisco or bacon grease. That is not the same thing. Pasture-raised lard is a very clean fat. It is a very healthful fat. It's lower in saturated fat than butter. It's very, excuse me, it's very high in oleic acid, which is the same oil you'll find in olive oil, and that's because of what our pigs are fed on and the life that they live. So if you can get yourself a good quality lard, if you don't have access to lard, then you could substitute with an oil, but for this recipe it is based on the lard, which was traditionally the ingredient that was used post World War II in England, where they couldn't readily get butter, and so lard was used as a staple ingredient in bread making. So let's get going with the yeast. So because I'm tripling the recipe, I'm using 2 cups of water, 6 teaspoons of yeast, and 6 teaspoons of sugar. Now, the reason that I'm using dry active yeast is because the yeast takes a little bit more time to get working, and in bread making, that's a good thing. In bread making, we want to think of slowing things down rather than always trying to speed things up, because the longer that the process takes, the more digested the grains in the flour are going to be in your end product. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you start this process off first, then by the time you've got all of your other ingredients going, that yeast will have got nice and hydrated, and it will have started to feed on the sugar, and you'll start to see the fermentation process bubbling away inside the jug. So I'm going to set this aside, and then while that is waking up, I am going to get a saucepan, and I want 2 cups of my A2 milk in here. And then I'm going to put 3/4 cup of lard into the milk, and I'm going to warm up the milk and melt the lard together on the stovetop. I'll just show you how beautiful and white and creamy colored our lard is. And I go through it at an absolutely alarming rate, because I have really started to substitute every place that I would use oil. I've got rid of all of the seed oils now, and occasionally I'll use avocado oil or olive oil in salad dressings, but for pretty much everything else, baking, roasting, frying, deep frying, I am using lard, and it is a phenomenal ingredient. In fact, I have a blog post that I will link below in the show notes that really explains the dark truth as to why lard disappeared from the shelves in the grocery stores. And it has a lot to do with following a money trail, as with a lot of things. Anyway, not to get into that here, you can go and read the blog post if you like to get involved in that kind of conversation. So I've got my lard and milk in there, and now I'm just going to put it on the stove top and let it warm up. I've just got it on the middle ring in a medium heat. So I want to talk to you about the flour. Now I have pre-measured 10 cups of flour here. I pre-measure my flour because I make a lot of bread, and I have been making this bread to sell at the farmers market. I sell them as what we call Baps. Now, Baps is a bit of a funny word, but it's the word that you will find used for the bread roll that I'm making in the region of England that I'm from. So in Northeast England, if you go into a sandwich shop and you ask for a bacon bap or a sausage bap or any kind of bap, this kind of bread is what you're going to get. And I've eaten the bread for years, and I've known the bread for years, but I only recently learned the recipe because I was actually looking for a lard-based recipe. So I was delighted for it to come full circle and learn that the bread that I grew up with was, in fact, a lard-based bread. Okay, so I am now going to pour this into the flour. I'm going to mix it in before I add my yeast, because if you get yeast too hot, then you're going to kill it. So I just want to make sure that I cool down the milk and the lard by mixing it together with the flour before I add anything else. These tools are amazing, by the way. I forget the name of it, but I just got mine on Amazon, and it's a Dutch something, or Danish. Maybe it's a Danish dough hook, something like that. But it makes actually mixing dough in a bowl so much easier. So I will link an Amazon link below to the one I got if you're interested. So if I put my fingers in the dough now, I can feel that it's nice and warm, and that's going to really help the yeast. But it's not hot, and in fact, some of the lumps of lard that are not quite melted are still cool. So my yeast is ready. You can see here in the bowl, it's got that nice frothy top on it. And I'm just going to pour it into my bowl. I have one ingredient left to add, and that's salt. I actually should have added it earlier when I put in the flour. And for the quantity I'm doing, I need 3 teaspoons of salt. So I'm going to continue to mix together my dough, and I'm going to use this dough hook until the dough becomes less sticky, and then I'll get my hands in there. I'm just going to knead it in the bowl because I'm going to let it rest in the bowl. I'm not actually going to take it out and knead it on the counter. It doesn't need it, and that just ends up making the counter messy and more cleanup. So to the point where I've kneaded it, it's kind of cleaned the bowl, and the dough has become soft, and there aren't any sort of crunchy floury parts. It's all a nice warm doughy texture. And so at that point, I'm just going to put some cling wrap over it, or you can put a damp tea towel, and I'm going to let it rest until it doubles in size. The dough is quite nice and warm, so it might go quite fast, but in general, about an hour at room temperature. Okay, so the dough has risen nicely, and I am now going to divide it up. I'm going to turn it out onto a floured board or work surface, and I'm going to divide it into 3. If you weigh your dough, it's going to help you to have equally sized bread loaves, and why that's important is that they will cook evenly. So I want to cut them into about 10 pieces, and I know that they should weigh just under 4 ounces each, which is equivalent of 100 grams. So I've done this quite a lot, so I sort of have a feel in my hand of what that amount of dough looks like. But the scales will keep you right. Once I've got these all cut, I'm going to form the rolls, and then we'll let them all rise again. Okay. So to make the bread rolls, I'm literally just turning the dough sort of inside out. And then when I'm ready to form the roll, I'm sort of going to put my fingers around and push the dough through like that. And then it sort of like makes a dumpling type of shape. And I'm going to put those on the tray. Okay, so all the rolls are ready. There is 30 here and actually 34 there, so I have 64 in total. The ones here have been rising for about 30 minutes. And what I'm gonna do just before I put them in the oven, this might seem counterintuitive, but this is the style of the Bap. I'm just going to squash them down a little bit like this. And that gives them the classic Bap shape. So it's at 450. I'm going to put them in for just 10 minutes. Now you'll find that when they come out the oven, they feel like they've got a hard shell. But trust me, they will actually soften once they cool down. So I'm just going to let them sit there for a minute before I can transfer them. I have to reuse these trays for the rolls that are sitting over here, and they have all risen nicely now. And then I'll get those ones in the oven. So I've squished these rolls down, and what I'm going to do to those ones here is I'm going to add some flour on the top, just a dusting. My children don't like the rolls too much with the flour on, but I think they look rather pretty, so that's what I'm going to do. And these ones will be floury Baps. Okay, the last rolls are ready. And these are the floured rolls. They smell absolutely delicious. They smell yeasty and floury, just like they came straight from the bakers. Just to show you these rolls that we did earlier, and just to see how soft they are. They smell delicious. They are a lovely quality dinner roll. They freeze well and they taste delicious. And yeah, let me know in the comments if you like this recipe or you're going to give it a go. See you next time. As I said earlier, this recipe can also be used to make a standard farmhouse loaf. All the recipe details have been put in the show notes for you, and a link to the blog. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to help the channel out, and keep following along for more inspo.